Yep, we're good.
All right, at this time, we'll call this meeting to order. I will please encourage you all to turn off any cell phones or electronic devices that you may have at this time, so there's limited interruptions. Val, will you go ahead and call the roll?
Commissioner Penny?
Here.
Commissioner Curry? Commissioner Danio?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Mayor Villa?
Here. At this time, I would call for to excuse Commissioner Curry from tonight. She's recovering from a surgery, as I understand it. If I could have a motion to excuse Commissioner Curry.
Motion. Second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll open this up to the public. Is anyone in the audience like to speak to this motion tonight? Seeing none, we'll close public participation. Any discussion needed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Now we'll move to the invocation. I'll ask you all to please stand as I lead the invocation and continue standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you today to pray, dear Lord, for you to hear us. Dear Lord, we pray for healing. We pray for comfort. Dear Lord, we know many are hurting out there, and we ask you to be with them, dear God. We pray for protection of all of our citizens and our police and our first responders. Dear Lord, bless and lead our president and governor and all of us up here. Dear Lord, help us to make the best decisions in the interest of our city, and be with us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Freaking out.
Sorry, John. I went out of order with threw everything off a little bit. No. You all can come in and take a seat. Currently, we're not allowed to have more than 50 people in a gathering. As long as you're comfortable with sitting close to maybe a neighbor or a spouse or a family member, you are welcome to take a seat.
There's still enough room to spread out a little bit if anybody's not comfortable.
Do we have the audio on in the workshop room? You know? Just turn it on. If anyone is uncomfortable with sitting close to each other, you are welcome to move into our chamber room and turn up the volume switch in there, and you can listen. And when
I'll go turn it up.
Okay.
Make sure it's working.
Mr. Forte will turn that up. We're not taking public comment right now.
But I'm not sure that the audio is working in here.
Okay, we'll speak.
Like you're just talking to us.
We'll speak more loudly.
I don't think it's turned up. I don't think it's supposed to be turned up in the bottom.
There we go. Is that better?
Yes.
All right. There we go. Thank you for that.
That's what I mean.
All right. And with that now, we will move to our first presentation of the night, which is the mid-year budget review. And so I'll ask Ms. Stella if please come forward. Thank you, Stella, and start whenever you're ready.
Good evening, Stella Grenay, Finance Director. So tonight we're going to take a look at the budget performance for the current fiscal year and take a look forward. The one thing I'll say up front is expect changes before we get to our second budget hearing. Probably several changes before then. So the first slide just gives you a reminder of where the general fund revenues sources are. 31% is ad valorem taxes, 22% are state share revenues and other taxes, 17% utility taxes, 9% franchise fees. So while you can control the millage, although the state still gives you a cap on that, almost 50% of your revenue in the general fund has external constraints to it, some shape or form from the state or other entities. So go ahead. So what we did because of the COVID crisis We tried to model, and the finance directors have been meeting, by the way, or over the phone weekly now. We thought originally we would try to model looking at the 2008 through 10 financial crisis. However, the city manager did note that this was a different type of crisis. It was a banking and a real estate crisis, not a pandemic. So there are going to be differences. The overall decline in state revenues, looking back at that time period, though, was almost 18%. But you'll see that the electric and tax and franchise fees was relatively flat during that period. So this is looking at state revenues for this fiscal year. We received, and then the blue line is the budget. The kind of more reddish orange line is the 2020, what we're projecting, and then the lighter orange line is what we're projecting for next year. We did receive information from the state that said to expect a 50% decline in our May and June state revenues. Now, it didn't go forward from that, but they did say for May and June, although things are now starting to open back up, as you know, and the economy seems to be picking back up. At the time I did this, we forecasted that 50% and then out with some increase through the end of the fiscal year, but much conservative forecast. So that came up with about a shortfall of a little over $500,000. And then going into next year, we forecasted not so drastic of an impact, but somewhere around a 30-34% impact. So there was about $298,000 shortfall. Now, since I've done this presentation, we've had a positive jobs report, which is a good thing. So hopefully we'll do better than we're forecasting here. So what we did is ask the departments to really take a look at their budgets and try to identify areas that could be set aside in a reserve, not taking it out of their budgets, but set aside within their departments in a reserve to try to come up with this potential shortfall that we have. And I want to really thank the department heads and the staff they had in their departments working on it, because they all cooperated, and this is what they came up with. Now, I guess I should have put the department names up there, but all of the departments did participate. They came up with $321,000, and then we already have a reserve that we have in the general fund of $253,000. So we have over the $500,000 reserve in case we need it. Go ahead. The next slide just gives you an indication of and it's sorted by budget amount, the highest at the top, of the highest revenues within the general fund. And as you see, ad valorem is the big one. The yellow highlighted ones are the state revenues. The kind of orange, light orange brown is FP&L. The third one down is, I wanted to mention, an internal revenue source. So that's the cost allocation that goes to the water sewer fund, the stormwater fund, the solid waste fund for paying for the services that the general fund provides. So that's not an external revenue source. Okay, the next slide, we wanted to talk about, there are capital projects that the general fund moves money into the capital projects fund to fund them. So we have placed, or the city manager has placed some of these on hold. The Public Works building And the Veterans Flagpole projects have been placed on hold right now. The radio and fire truck reserves are reserves that we're trying to build up for when we need to purchase those things. So if we really got in dire straits, we could use those funds. And then the pedestrian bridge is already underway, so those funds would not be available. The next slide goes into the water sewer fund, and you'll see the budget, the forecast for this year, and the purple is the forecast for next year. You will see that we're forecasting revenues higher next year, but that's because you get a full year's value of the rate increase, because it's billed in arrears, so there's about an extra month from that rate increase. However, our concerns with the water sewer fund is not the revenues, but the actual cash that we're going to collect, because we could be booking revenues and not, get the cash in. So the next slide deals with that. So January, we had slightly less than $500,000 in our accounts receivable for the water sewer fund. And now in May, we have $638,000. So it has gone up that much. In addition, we've paid a couple of months of the online payment fees to encourage customers to pay online, and those were about $4,500 a month. The staff is continuing to work with customers, trying to get payment plans worked out with them. We'll remind that this month we go back to the disconnects and service fees. Our first disconnect is scheduled for tomorrow. We had about a third higher number than we normally have. So staff, they did a very good job. I want to appreciate them today in customer service. They called and contacted and reached out to everyone that they could, offered them payment plans, tried to make arrangements for them to get their payments, and they were able to get it down probably about 10% from what they originally started out with. Next one. In the water sewer fund, we did the same thing as the general fund, and Antoine and his staff came up with the $88,000, almost $90,000 in reserves to set aside. And then we have contingency reserve of $130,000, so about $219,000 in case we need it, in case we don't get the revenues or the cash collections we expect. The next major operating fund is the stormwater fund. You may recall that this one is on the tax bill. So the money has already been collected with the property taxes. So this just takes a look at the different revenues over the forecasted period. So other than interest earnings, as you would expect in all the funds, the stormwater fund should be stable. There is a reserve of $18,000 in the operating fund of stormwater. Now, stormwater is a heavy capital fund, a lot of capital projects. That's on the next one. So the duckbill project, we have actually declined the grant for that because it came in at about double the cost that we expected. The Ferndale Pond also we're not going forward with. So those two projects will be available as we go through the capital, or the dollars from those projects, the capital planning process to reallocate to other projects.
Vice Mayor.
Stella, did you say the reserve for the stormwater is only $18,000?
That's the operating fund. Most of the money in stormwater is in the capital fund.
Okay.
Goes to projects.
All right. That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah. The Flomage Street drainage pipe just went out to bid, so that one is out to bid.
Stella, if I could pause you right there. With the Ferndale property, are we going to look to sell that then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you remember, we did an analysis on that after we purchased the property with the expectation that we could turn that into a retention pond or a passive park. We found out that it was, through Mead Hunt, the city engineers, they projected that as a water quality retention pond as opposed to a storm flood reduction retention pond. So we didn't feel it to be appropriate to spend $660,000 on a water quality project when we have flooding issues, that money may be better directed to a retention pond that would reduce localized flooding.
Okay, thank you. Stella, you can continue.
Okay. And then the last operating fund is the solid waste fund, and again, it's relatively stable. However, the same concern from the and as you know, that's a contract expense. The same thing as the water sewer fund, we're concerned about cash flow and making sure that we collect the receivables. And so that's the end of the update presentation. Anybody have any questions?
I just want to recap a couple of important points that Stella made. And one is, I'll kind of go in the reverse order, the water sewer fund. You know, people who are suffering the consequences of COVID-19 and they're out of work, or their children are home from school, or in some cases they have college-age children that have returned home because the colleges are closed. And we're seeing an increase in utility bills because we're seeing an increase in water usage, laundry, dishwashing, toilet flushing, showers, etc. So I even put a blurb on Facebook, and I put it on utility bills, that this is some of the reasons that you're seeing an increased cost of your utility bill. The problem, as Stella mentioned, is the projected revenue is there, but people are still struggling paying those bills, so we may not collect the cash. We may not collect the payments for those. So that's something that we need to be aware of. And now this is a little bit of a different mid-year budget update that we provided you than I've done since I've been back. And it's really just to kind of show you where we're at and what we're expecting for the balance of this year due to revenue shortfalls and what we anticipate projections to be. And I'm not an economist, but I kind of look at it this way. If I have $100 a month that's disposable cash, and during this pandemic I don't have it to spend, but then things get back to normal a couple of months later, and I've got my $100 a month as disposable cash, it doesn't make up for the 3 or 4 months that I wasn't able to spend. So you don't get a catch-up on the monies that people are spending in their sales tax purchases. So you're not going to see, as the economy recovers, that we're going to make up for the 3 months of shortfall of revenues. That's money that's gone and won't be recovered. So I asked when we did this with the department heads, and I've asked them to go into their next year budget presentation preparation to really, we're tight as it is. We don't have a lot of waste in our budgets. So they're really struggling to find, and I've asked them to basically go from zero up and not just take the existing budget and add a percentage to it or something that they would project would be an increase, but to really zero it up and figure out what their cost would be. And one of the comments was, well, COVID-19 pandemic is an emergency. Why don't we use our emergency reserve funds? Well, it sounds good on the surface, but when you take the purpose of those emergency funds, which, for example, you would use after a hurricane to do road cleanup, repair things, and, you know, although we're still several years past the last 2 storms and still not gotten our monies back from FEMA, eventually we get the money back. In a case like this of a pandemic where you spend monies as an emergency, there's no one coming behind you even several years later to reimburse, to pay that money back. FEMA's not coming in and saying, all right, spend that money and we'll reimburse you later. That's not happening. So I can't rely on those emergency funds because, again, we're expecting a high hurricane season, a storm season this year. So they understand what my expectation is going into the budget. The other thing I told them that we would consider is, as we get into the next budget year, into the actual fiscal year after October, if the revenues seem to be coming in better than what we projected, we'll go ahead and do a quarter-year review after the first of the year and take into consideration the new revenues, that if we had projects that we put on hold and we can fund them, we'll revisit that in January, February to try to put that into the budget so that we can keep some of these projects moving forward. So I hope that kind of explains our current position and you understand where we're heading.
Is there any questions from the commission for any staff? No? Well, I just want to applaud you, Stella and Mr. Forte, for tightening our belts, and all of our department heads out there, so thank you very much. We appreciate it. This is a tough time for everyone, and to cut back on things that we really want to see happen in our city is tough to do, especially some of those capital projects. All right, so now moving on, we'll move to public comments. This is the audience's opportunity to address the City Commission about anything not on our regular agenda tonight. If anyone would like to come forward, you'll have 5 minutes to speak, and then you'll see a yellow and then a red light come on when you have to be done. And I will cut you off because we have a anticipated long discussion tonight. So is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak tonight? Is it about something not on our regular agenda tonight?
I believe so.
Okay. You can come forward, sir. And we'll... No, it's okay. We have a timer. Yep. Wait till you get to the mic, and then we'll need you to state your name and address for the record, and then you can start.
Okay, I have a little bit of a handout. Do you want that before or after?
You can give it to the clerk, and then it becomes a public record. Do you have one for each commissioner?
I believe that's 6.
Okay.
Okay, so this is very soft.
State your name and address for the record.
Aaron Markovitz, 1324 Riverside Drive. I am a product designer. I've been living in the town since 2003, part-time for the first few years, and after that, now currently full-time. I'm an industrial designer. I worked for Ray-Ban for a lot of years, and then I came here for Costa Del Mar for 14 years. And when I chose where to buy, I chose Holly Hill because it was small, it was affordable, it was eclectic, and I loved the people in the neighborhood. I found a house, I introduced myself to the neighbors, everyone was great. I still have many of the same neighbors, but I've got the river, and that was a big draw to come to this town. And so 10 years ago, I was living in a little Sears home, which I've since rebuilt into a house almost twice the size, with twice the taxes. But I still have the river. And anyway, since 2003, as I said, I rebuilt my house. My taxes have gone up, but also the neighborhood has changed significantly, and it's for the better. We've got new families coming in with kids, with pets, with grandparents. We've got a sidewalk that brings traffic to the river, and it's all good. It allows the river to become the real jewel that it is for this town. But there's one downside, and that downside is the increased traffic on Riverside Drive, and that's the purpose of me being here, is to talk about the fact that I believe that in the 17 years that I've seen the traffic patterns change, I've seen increased volume, I've seen increased speeding, but I've also seen a change in attitude. And when I first came here, this sleepy little 2-lane road called Riverside Drive, which people have to deal with in order to enjoy the river, used to be, part of the loop, something you'd take a Sunday drive on and enjoy the river. Now it's a Route 1 alternate. And a lot of people are just looking at how fast they can get from Mason to Granada and vice versa. And so if you're trying to cross that road, typically in the past, people would stop and let you cross. Now people tend to speed up and avoid you. And it's a pretty dangerous situation. There are people in this room tonight who have children who live within a block of the river, who are residents of Holly Hill and won't take their children to the river because they consider it too dangerous. So anyway, With that said, I'm just appealing to this group and telling you that I am, I love being in Holly Hill. I love it primarily because of the river. I know that more people, because of the walkway, are enjoying it. And, with the changing traffic patterns, it really makes it difficult to safely enjoy the river for a lot of citizens. And so with that said, I just would like you to make it an imperative to do something about that during your term. And I took it upon myself to print out, how much time do I have? To print out, a report which seemed to be the most quintessential report on speed calming and the activities that can best address it. You probably know this better than me, but it said things like little signs saying, children at play do not work. What works is community involvement, road engineering, and enforcement. And if you enforce it, if you have visible police officers writing citations, as they do in Ormond and in other towns nearby, it works. And I know that I've seen visible signs of good things with ghost cars and, the radar signs, but, I believe more needs to be done. And with that, I have 45 seconds, so I'm done.
Great, thank you. What was your name one more time?
Aaron Markovitz.
Aaron, thank you so much.
And I would be happy to get involved in any kind of a committee if that were.
Well, I just appreciate you coming forward with actual proposals, and it's very rare to someone to complain and then they have a full-fledged solution possibly in there. So I'll have to review this and get that from you.
This is just one copy I made, but this is the Michigan DOT did it just came up as being the most credible, comprehensive report on how to do traffic calming in residential areas.
All right. Thank you very much, Aaron.
I'll have Val scan that in and send the copy
to all of us. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to the Commission tonight about something not on our regular agenda tonight? Yes, sir. Long time no see. You know the drill.
Steve Smith, 1410 Riverside Drive. I appreciate my neighbor Aaron getting involved with help there on the traffic at Riverside Drive. I was at a meeting recently with this commission, and you said that you had some input from social media that motivated you to reach a consensus and move from education to enforcement. You give direction to the city manager to start maybe with enforcement in the residential areas. And what I've heard from attending the meetings at Seco Hall at Neighborhood Watch, that there's only money for enforcement on Nova Road and Ridgewood. And there is no enforcement money in the other neighborhoods. So, starting the budget process this year, I'd like to perhaps keep your ears tuned for money in the budget for some enforcement in our neighborhoods. And I'm looking forward to that starting sometime, I mean...
Well, it's happening right now, Mr. Smith.
Let me just clarify, if you don't mind. The money Mr. Smith's talking about is a grant that the city received to use specifically for overtime for code enforcement, for traffic control, and that's designated for the state roads of US 1 Nova. So that's a grant. The city's budget goes towards our officers, and as they have time, they do code. I keep saying code enforcement. They do traffic enforcement in the neighborhoods. But as you know, with only 3 officers on, and the number of calls that they have, they don't have a lot of time to designate specifically to traffic enforcement. But the budget you're talking about was a grant specifically for those 2 roads.
I know that Deputy Chief Miller said that the numbers don't look good, that we'll get the grant, and he's writing it anyway, and we're going to be applying.
We already have the grant.
Well,
we're currently working in FDOT.
Chief, can you come to the mic? Thank you.
Chief Stephen Aldrich, Holly Hill Police Department. We are currently working a Florida Department of Transportation grant that does address the two major state roads. We have applied for next year's grant, and we have worded it to try to add additional overtime that will allow us to work in the residential areas as well, as we do, and we are aware that we do get complaints about speeding in our residential areas. We have tried to focus more on the residential. I will admit, during this COVID time, it has changed a lot of our practices, but we are now returning to our normal operations at this time. So you probably will see more enforcement.
Thank you, Chief.
We appreciate it, and it's a long time coming. You know, your dad put up the signs that said strictly enforced. There's still one left at 914 Riverside. And there was a lot of them at one time, but there's still one left. But maybe we'll bring that back, you know, and it might help everybody get along over there. It's pretty scary.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to the Commission about anything not on our regular agenda tonight? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comments. And we'll move to number 4, approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from May 12th, 2020?
Second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Would anyone in the audience like to speak to the Commission on this item? Seeing none, I'll close public participation. Any discussion needed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We do not have a consent agenda tonight, so we'll move down to our regular agenda. Ordinance 2020-0-3027. Mr. Forte.
Ordinance 2020-0-3027, first reading. An ordinance of the City of Holly Hill, Florida, amending Chapter 42, Pensions and Retirement, Article 2, Police Officers of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Holly Hill, Florida, providing for a definition of the term average final compensation and salary, providing for a repealer, providing for a savings clause, providing for codification, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Would you like the Chief to give the update on that?
The Chief is a member of the Pension Board, and he can give you a summary. If you have any questions, I'm prepared to help answer those.
All right. Chief?
Yep, Chief Stephen Aldrich, City of Holly Hill. I'm also the chair of our pension board. The ordinance before you is totally more in the definition of what the final average compensation is.
Brian, can you turn the volume up a little bit more, please? They can't hear it in the back. Thank you.
Can't hear it all. Okay. Sounds a little louder.
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, the ordinance before you.
Thank you, Brian.
Is a clarification and a definition of the final average compensation of salary. And the reason for that is actually it's a little late coming, but in 2012, the state made some changes in the law and froze like personal leave banks and limited the amount of overtime that could be used towards the final average compensation. So actually it wasn't addressed prior, so we were just doing a cleanup of that ordinance, and the verbiage in that is exactly how we operate currently and how the fire department operates as well, and figuring out that final average compensation.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Is there any questions for staff? Thank you, Chief. Is there anyone else in the audience? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this item tonight? Seeing none, I'll close public comment, and I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Is there any discussion needed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving to our public hearing tonight, Ordinance 2020-0-3028 for first reading.
Ordinance 2020-0-3028, first reading. An ordinance of the City of Holly Hill, Florida, approving the 7th Amendment to the Marina Grande Residential-Based Mixed-Use Plan Unit Development, the MPUD Development Agreement, providing for conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. Brian Walker, City Planner, is here to present the item, and there are representatives on behalf of the applicant here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Forte. Mr. Walker?
Mayor, Commissioners. In 2004, the City Commission approved the Marina Grand mixed-use plan development, and through the years, it's been amended 6 times. Now, the original agreement provided for general signage, but it did not provide for signage that would be used specifically for the sale and rental of residential and commercial units. So in 2016, the applicant submitted a request to the city to amend the MPUD in order to allow signage for sales, and this was the 6th amendment to the MPUD. The applicant proposed a signage plan that included the following, and this is also shown in Exhibit A in the staff report. 3 two-panel signs located along Riverside Drive, 3 flutter flag signs located on the dock, and a banner sign located on the South Tower. Now, on March 28, 2017, the City Commission approved the applicant's request for real estate signage, but it came with a time limit. The time limit was 3 years, and that term expired on March 27, 2020. So on May 6, 2020, the applicant submitted an application to amend the MPUD and request that the city reapprove and extend the display time for the signage that would be related to sales of residential and commercial units. Specifically, the applicant requests that the plan be reapproved for an additional 3 years from the date of the approval of this agreement or until such time that owners no longer own or control 5 units of the total residential units, whichever occurs sooner. And the applicant in Exhibit B in your staff report has submitted their explanation and justification for their request. Now, when it comes to approving the applicant's request, the Commission basically has to consider whether or not it is compliant with the policies of the comprehensive plan. There's only one policy in the comprehensive plan that deals with signage, and that's policy 1.2.8. It says, such regulations shall ensure that new and replacement signs shall adhere to the community standard for aesthetics and minimize confusion that results from visual disarray while allowing reasonable identification and promotion of businesses. So the policy refers to the city's land development regulations, but it doesn't give you specific measurable standards that can be applied. So really the Commission is left up to its own judgment as to whether or not this request complies with the city's comprehensive plan. At its meeting on Monday, June 1st, 2020, the Board of Planning and Appeals voted unanimously to recommend approval of the proposed 7th Amendment to the Marina Grand MPUD. As far as staff's recommendation, staff simply states that the City Commission can approve the proposed amendment to the MPUD agreement if the City Commission, in its opinion, finds that the proposed signage program is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Are there any questions right now for Mr. Walker or for any member of staff? All right. At this time, too, I believe we should all disclose any ex parte communication that we've had. I'll go first. I did receive a text today from Rob Merrill, I'm assuming attorney for the applicant, and also received a message from one Mrs. Mulder, who is against the sign. And I received a phone call from Mr. Manchurian, and I didn't get to speak with him as well. I had no other responses. I didn't respond to anybody. But if anyone else had any other ex parte communication, now would be the time to disclose it. Yes, sir.
I received a text message from Mr. Merrill, and we missed each other all day and spoke for 30 seconds before the meeting about it. I also did have a visit from Ms. Heidi Heller, stop by my office today to discuss it.
All right. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Anybody else? All right, thank you.
Jonathan did send you a letter too, I think, Chris, so for the record.
Right, he sent an email.
It was emailed.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, he did send an email as well. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And Mr. Simpson, and I will let you go in 1 second, Rob. Before we go, I do want you to, Mr. Simpson, to talk to us about public hearing and about substantial competent evidence up here. So, but we'll do that after Mr. Merrill's done. Okay. Thank you. And now you can go ahead with your presentation.
Or Scott can go first. I can do that part too if you want.
Yeah.
So, Rob Merrill for the record. I'm
Thank you.
Cobb Cole, 149 South Ridgewood in Daytona Beach. I was here 15 or so years ago and privileged to represent the developer of this project. And we had a room full of people on at least 3 occasions that many of which were concerned about whether this project, Marina Grande, should happen in Holly Hill. I'm thankful to say I think that although only half of the buildings have been built, the project is fantastic, and it's a success for Holly Hill. And I think you guys are probably happy to have them here. And about 3 years ago, with Brett Dill, who some of you might remember from the Swerdlow group, we came to the City Commission to talk about the signage, both the permanent signage plan and some temporary signage for the sales of the units, the remaining units. And there's a lot of discussion then as well about the subject of signage. And my recollection is that most of the concerns were about whether there was going to be rental as part of the signage package, and there was a lot of people who came from Marina Grande who didn't want rentals. They're allowed, and I guess that's is what it is. But I think that was most of the conversation that happened in my recollection 3 years ago. There were some questions about whether the signage that was being put up would withstand high winds and things like that, or whether it would make flapping noises and stuff like that. And we had a really long discussion about, well, if it does make noise or doesn't work out and flies off the building, do we have an enforcement process? And we set up I think we came to the conclusion that there would be an enforcement process. Here's who you talk to, and here's how you do it. And since then, there haven't been any, enforcement issues or complaints made that had to be enforced by the City of Holly Hill, code enforcement or otherwise. So I think it's for the most part the signs themselves haven't been a problem in the sense of a nuisance, which might be a word that Scott would use if he's talking about zoning and competent substantial evidence. But I'm not getting into all that legal stuff. At the end of the day, to me, this is a question of whether it's okay for these guys to continue to have signage so they can keep selling these units. The folks that I represent bought 150 of the remaining units in the condo that had not been sold yet, and we have 95 left. So they're making progress. And you'll see a letter in your packet. I tabbed the page for you. 7.1D from Jonathan Mancharian, who you mentioned earlier, Chris, who basically tells you it's meaningful to us, and here's sort of the footprints and the records of the sales that have happened. Walter Morgan is here, and I want to ask him to speak after me. And he knows actually a lot more about this from the ground than I do. He's involved in the sales there, and I think he can tell you what effect it's had, in part because the sign was taken down for a while with the high winds, etc. So one of the things you guys asked, other than, hey, if it doesn't work out, how do we enforce it, was, how do we know this really has meaning to us? I mean, first of all, I don't know that when you look at the overhead view of it, is that
That's a Google Earth view.
I can hardly even see it.
From the bridge.
It might be my eyes, but I can hardly. It's just
super
faded.
bright.
It's the old sign.
Well, so there you go. You can't really see it. At the end of the day, I think a lot of what we talked about was, you look at it to scale, and the things that Brian was talking about, really the comp plan policies, and we're talking about consistency with that. A lot of it's kind of subjective. With signage, it's. Is it a nuisance? Is it visually distracting to drivers? Does it have a positive business effect? And is it to scale and tasteful? Signage is something you kind of look at it and okay, it looks okay or it doesn't. In this case, it's from a distance you can hardly even see it. Well, can you go back to the original one? This one's actually intended to show a purpose that I'll get to later if we need to. But the first one is probably the best one to show, because although it shows a different color than the previous sign, it shows you to scale that the banner sign that says, the units are for sale is really, in comparison to the size of the building, is very small. So it's a big sign, but it's a gigantic building, as we know. So the idea of scale and proportion and tastefulness is part of the consideration when you're looking at signage. And I know you guys know that from business signage and other contexts. So what I would say is, I think that what you're going to hear, especially from Walter, after I get out of the way, is this is a meaningful sign that's going to help get these units sold. I know you guys are interested in these units being owned by individuals and on the tax roll and the benefits of that and the increased values based on and the increased benefit to Holly Hill by having residents that are good citizens for the community, which we already have there, but we need 95 more homes there. So, and ultimately I would say that you guys know that there are 2 more units entitled here, 2 more buildings. So, the tax benefit that you guys have been enjoying now for 15 years could conceivably double if the interest comes back. And this sign, I think that we're requesting is the signage that we're requesting is part of that. I would also say that this project came about and went through a difficult time in the economy that all of us did. What's happening right now is it hasn't been helping much, and so the idea that you guys, I hope, are thinking about stimulating commerce like most local governments and state governments and national government with this pandemic. Hopefully, that's something that would encourage you to help with the increased commerce that would come from having this additional opportunity to sell units. So with that, I'd like to do 2 things. One, ask Walter to talk more about the reality of what's out there as it relates to the business of selling the condominium units, and then I'd like to have the opportunity, if we've got folks in the audience who have questions, comments, concerns, to be able to provide responses from the perspective of the applicant.
Thank you, Mr.
Of course, any questions you guys have before I move.
Are there any questions for Mr. Merrill from the Commission?
Thanks.
Thank you. And now, Walter, state your name and title for the record, please.
My name is Walter Borgen. I'm with the broker-owner for RE/MAX Signature out of Daytona Beach Shores and the on-site sales broker for the Marina Grand.
Thank you, sir.
So thank you guys for having us out here today. Appreciate that and the opportunity to be able to speak in front of you. Signage is obviously very important in real estate, especially in new development sales. We've sold out during the downturn of the market. We were part of Bella Vista, Palma Bella, Marabella, all on Atlantic Avenue, as well as some other communities around and throughout Volusia and Flagler. We've been here at the Marina Grand twice. Once back in 2012 we started, and then just recently we came back again in 2019. And just to give you a little idea of the impact that the Marina Grand has in the overall condo market, the Marina Grand represents each year about 30% of the riverfront sales that are between $200,000 and $600,000, all the way from Ormond all the way down to Ponce Inlet. So from a riverfront community, it has the lion's share of sales. The problem there is it's still only going to be 3 to 5 a month. So they overbuilt. That was their mistake when they first built it. They shouldn't have built both buildings at one time, and that's why it's taken so long to get through the inventory. In fact, this is the only building that I know of from Ormond by the Sea all the way down to Ponce Inlet that still has new unlived-in inventory available in it. In fact, we're still selling these at a below construction cost, and that's why there's such a challenge. There's only 2 new buildings on the oceanfront that are being built, and there's none on the riverfront that are being built right now. And what I'd like to point out from there is that signage is what identifies to people that there's something for sale. If you drive down Atlantic Avenue and you look at all of those condos, I'm going to assume that you guys don't know the name of every condo that's there, right? They kind of all start to blend together and look the same. So if you wanted to know, that looks like a nice building, how would I find out if it's for sale? How do you find the name? How do you find the thing? What do you do? So the signage definitely helps us identify that, and from this, it's on one of the most high traffic bridges in our area where we get tourist traffic, we get people from all around the world that are going to go by, and it creates interest. We're not lucky like Daytona Beach Shores and the other cities that Atlantic Avenue is where the condominiums are. That's one of the busiest areas that's going to bring all those people. Instead, we're on Riverside Drive. So you're not going to end up in front of this building to see one of those signs on accident. So this building is what, or the signage on the side of that building is what makes people turn to go look and say, hey, there's something for sale here. Or, hey, let's try and call them. Let's look for that. Let's Google the name and find out. So the sign has a lot of impact. In fact, over 30% of our traffic comes directly from signage. Now, that doesn't count, because it's too hard to, as you try to count all these numbers, that doesn't count the internet leads that saw it when they were driving over the bridge and decided to look it up and requested something online. That's going to get tracked as an online lead. 30% of our traffic walks in the door and says, we came here because we saw the building signage. And just as in any community, anywhere, building signage is going to provide the most high-quality leads for real estate sales. And the reason for that is the prime thing with real estate sales is going to be the location and the exterior curb appeal. So if you already like that, there's a good chance if it's in your price range, you could see yourself living someplace. If you don't like the location or you don't like the exterior curb appeal, you're certainly not going to spend $300,000-$400,000 in a place that you're embarrassed to drive up to or you don't like or it doesn't fit your lifestyle or whatever. So that signage has a huge impact on the quality of leads that we get, the amount of traffic that we get, and if we lose that, it's going to cost more than tens of thousands of dollars every year to try and replace that same kind of traffic through other sources. I mean, we do all of the other sources. We do internet, we do the paper, we do the radio commercials. We do just about anything that you can think of that's out there. With all of that being done, and nearly $20,000 a month being spent on marketing, 30% still come from that side. So that's why the building signage is so important to us as a sales team. And in fact, when we first came back the second time, the signage was taken down for a little bit. And when that signage was taken down, I just want to give you an impact of what it was for the sales. We had a total of, I think, 36 sales for the year. Okay.
2019?
Well, this is going to be, I had some, from April 18th, 2019 to July 18th, 2019, that was the time that the sign was down. Okay? So the periods I kind of broke down here a little bit. During that time period, we only had 2 sales. Okay, during the time that sign was down. Now, from January to April 18th, we had 7 transactions. And then from July 18th to December 31st, we had 27 transactions last year. So you can see that the time period that sign was down, it was a huge impact to the overall sales, right? Without a doubt. Then I'll tell you now, we have the signage up right now, amidst of this COVID epidemic that we're dealing with. Okay, we've had over 7 sales during just from March and April and May. We're not even getting all the way to June. Okay? Or July, And we've already had 7 sales. So if we predict where we're going to be, we'll probably be 12 or 14 sales because we had the building signage. If we wouldn't have had that building signage with the COVID and the other thing, I think we would have been dead in the water completely, because of the impact that we saw the last time the sign was down. So the signs are expensive. This sign was over $20,000. Obviously, to come have attorneys come out here and go through permitting and sign companies and people to come speak and all of that stuff, that all costs money as well. The sign's been repaired before. When the new sign was installed just recently, they put extra fasteners on there. They did extra things to make sure that the sign was, installed as best as it could be, to make sure it was quiet, make sure that it looked good, and all of those things. So that's only been since July that was installed. So if we have to take that down, that's obviously, an additional expense that would be incurred. Not to mention if we have to propose trying to replace it in another place, we have to go back through the whole plan again. We have to pay the attorneys again. We have to come back in here again. We have to take down that sign. We have to put up another sign. So I'd say there's probably another $30,000 or $40,000.
Hold on one second. If we could just have no input from the audience, if we could respect the speaker, and you will all get your own time to come up as well. Thank you so much. It's okay.
So while we certainly, I certainly respect all of the residents at the Marina Grand. In fact, we've sold to hundreds of them ourselves, and I've personally met many of them. Certainly want them to enjoy all of their units. We want the property values to continue to go up there. We want to attract more, quality people to come and live in the Marina Grand. We definitely need this signage to do that. It's a huge impact on there. If not, we have to continue to rent some. And since we came back, we're now taking out of the rental pool. Okay, so we're taking out because we're averaging that 3 to 5 sales a month, which is more than twice what the 2 or 3 previous companies before us had. They were selling 12, 13 a year. Okay, we sold over 40 of them last year. Okay, and we're on track to do that same thing this year with COVID. So, and that wasn't from by dropping the prices. In fact, the average sales price per square foot now is actually higher than it was during that time. So we've kept the prices good. We're selling some of them.
Hold on 1 second, Vice Mayor.
What's the average sales price of a unit?
I don't have that written down. But I can tell you it's about $325,000, somewhere around there, $315,000 to $325,000. And I can get that for you if you guys needed it. But that's about the average sales price there.
Thank you, sir. Continue.
And so we're selling some of the hardest units to sell right now. When the buildings went out before, they didn't have good inventory control, even though I begged for it. They just were, because there were so few units sold, they didn't sell them in the right order, per se, and kind of control the inventory. So we've done a good job at that by controlling the inventory, releasing certain units available at a certain time, doing things like that. That's what's given us the momentum to get where we're going as well, and also sell some of those most difficult units, the 07s and the 08s, and all the ones that are towards the back, and as well as we're selling some on the front, on the inside, which have been a little harder to sell. So anyway, we have our challenges there. We want the residents certainly to be happy with it. We want to get out of there. We don't want to be there 7 or 8 years, obviously, which it could take us. If we drop down to like the other companies and sell 1 or 2 a month, with another 100 units, we could be there a very long time. We'd like to be able to be out there within another 2 years or so, or less, possibly, if we can be. So our goal isn't to stay there forever. We want to get out. It does affect, as you can see, it's a big sign. It gets great attention. It does go not in front of, but it probably, I think it's 10 to maybe 12 units that it's in front of out of the 486 total units that are there. There's about 10 or 12 of them that can see the sign from their balcony. But as you can see, it's not like directly in front of their balcony. It's not like waving on the side of their balcony. It doesn't really obstruct their view. But I'm sure it's not exactly what they want to look at. They'd probably rather see the white side of the building than to see the sign. But it's not actually interfering with their view so that they can't see the ocean or they can't see the river. And I guess that's probably all I have to say, unless there's questions from you guys or if I need to come back up later.
Something I forgot to mention.
I don't know anything.
Mr. Merrill, you can come up again.
Yeah.
I meant to mention, I'm sorry, Rob Merrill again. I didn't want to interrupt the flow. This is, and I only have one copy of it, meeting minutes from the Condo Association Board, where they unanimously supported the sign staying up.
Thank you.
It's in the record, July 15, 2019.
Can I raise a question that I mentioned to some of you, and I think it deserves some kind of an answer? And Rob, I'm sorry I didn't talk to you about it before. But typically in these scenarios, when you have a developer who owns these units, they try to sell them, and then when you sell them, it gets turned over to the HOA or the MOA, whatever that's called. So in this case, the developer has sold 100% of the units. What you have now is a new buyer who bought a bulk of the remaining units. So is he an owner? Does he have the same rights and privileges of the previous developer? I'm trying to figure that out.
Is this a condo association question or a zoning question?
This is Joe's question.
Okay. So from a zoning question, they are the successor to the developer and have the ability to make this request today. And so.
It just kept me up last night.
I think that's the answer to the question about the zoning piece. The condo association piece, that's a different matter, and that's not my expertise, but but it relates to that.
But you know what I was.
So here's what we can make sure of. Scott and I can make sure you have the authority, whatever authority is necessary to make you comfortable, Joe, between now and second reading. But I can tell you with confidence that these guys, as the successor, even though they're a bulk owner, if you will, they have stepped into the shoes of the same person who made this request 3 years ago. And by the way, had more units, but was in this exact same position from an ownership standpoint. The turnover doesn't affect that.
Okay.
While I'm up.
Great.
We've got Walter.
Did you have anything more to add, Walter?
I don't think not unless there's any questions.
Are there any questions for the applicant? I had a question. It was talked about moving the sign potentially, and I know that I have a picture here that I believe all of us have that shows the fabricated new install sign kind of behind things. I guess it comes out at a jagged edge. Mr. Forte and I spoke today about potential of a different placing of the sign. Have you looked into any different placings of the sign?
So the reason why I didn't get into that initially was I wasn't sure whether the person who was suggesting that, who was here at the planning board meeting, was still here and wanted to suggest that. And if so, that was my response, which is, we tried, and Don Bell Signs did this mock-up for us. So you see, it's not visible completely. So whether we could find another place for it, we looked all around. I tried to figure it out myself. Binoculars across the way. I don't know the answer to that. I suppose we could explore further if someone were, really adamant about that. But this is obviously the ideal place from a standpoint of coming across the bridge.
This is Walter Borgen again. And the other thing, if you look at the buildings, one of the unique things about the Marina Grand and one of the great things about the design and structure is that each balcony is designed with privacy. So it's not like a lot of, say, the DiMucci buildings or things like that where the balconies butt up to each other and you can kind of lean over and just see the other person. This building has a great design, and if you see, each one's angled in a way where you get complete privacy from the other one. So if we were to move it, say, onto one of those other spots in between there, that's going to be disruptive and directly in front of somebody's balcony, Whereas where it is now, it's between two windows on the front. There's probably, I don't know how many space, maybe 30 feet, 20 feet. I didn't measure it or anything, but there's quite a bit of space between that and anybody's actual balcony. So it's not going to be as much of a nuisance. Obviously, up on the top, the perspective of what it is, what it says, what it's doing is going to be much more difficult to see. If there's other potential ideas out there, we can certainly look at them. I just couldn't find one. I asked Don Bell Signs for them to give us their opinion. They didn't have another opinion other than that one, and their recommendation was, that it wasn't going to be good placement, but of course they'd do it if we wanted to pay them.
Course.
Right.
Just for the record, I guess I did send some of the quotes from Don Bell. I want to make sure those were in the record too. I think they want $6,000 just to take the sign down that's there now. So, and then another $20,000 to put one up on the top. So it's not just about this cost, but costs are part of the consideration. And I hope you guys know about that and consider that as well.
All right, and Vice Mayor.
Is this the appropriate time for suggestions, or do you want to hear from the public and then my suggestions? Or
these are supposed to be questions, so we'll do suggestions after we hear from the public. That way, we can listen to the public first. Are there any other questions for the applicant or staff? Joe, did you have anything to add before I open up the public comment?
No, the other conversation when I did cross the bridge yesterday, and I observed just what Mr. Merrill had presented, that the sign on that south-facing parapet area of the top of the building is blocked by the structure itself, and you really can't see it. The other alternative someone had mentioned to me was on the east side of the building, which I have showing you now. If this is a consideration to the applicant of placing the sign there, which would get you a lot of visibility from the bridge, and I don't know if that's a possibility, but I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
Well, we'll certainly consider that. It looks to me like there's not a totally flat surface there, Joe. Did you look at it?
I don't know what's up there. I didn't explore it.
I literally, from my office, look out through the binoculars, and I couldn't see. It didn't look like there was a good flat spot, but we can look at it.
Okay.
This is Walter Borgen. If I could just add one thing. It's not only there's not a flat spot there, which would create difficulty, it's also going to limit the exposure. Right now, where it's at, you get both north and southbound traffic have a great view of it. The water has a great view of it. You can see it for miles. If you put it on the front, you're only going to get the westbound traffic. I know I said northbound, but anyway, westbound traffic coming over is the only thing you're just going to see the front of it. So it's going to limit those people that are going from the mainland over to the beach side over east. They're not going to see that unless they look in the rearview mirror, which is now they're going to look at that because it's an iconic building. It creates interest for Holly Hill. People are going to notice that. So that's why I think it's a more difficult place to go in the front.
Thank you, sir. One last question before you sit down, and maybe Mr. Merrill, how far out does the sign come out currently from the wall? Do you know that off the top of your head?
It's flush.
It's flat. It's completely flush.
Into the wall.
Okay.
That was an elaborate process to get it fast.
Right. Okay. I remember that was the issue last time. So
it's expensive to pull it down.
great. Thank you. All right. Are there any other questions before we open up the comment? All right. So at this time, we're going to open this up to public comment. You will have 5 minutes to speak, and you have to speak only on this issue. And before we begin, I'm going to ask Mr. Simpson to talk about substantial competent evidence, if you could.
Okay.
How we have to base our
It's
decisions.
been touched on, but basically this is a rezoning request. And all rezonings the applicant has to show by substantial competent evidence that they comply with our requirements. The request complies with our requirements. And then if we want to, if the commission decides it does not want to support the request, there needs to be substantial competent evidence showing that they do not comply. You can actually have substantial competent evidence showing either way on a decision, but what's important is first, PUD is a little unique because that's a negotiated item, so that throws a level of uniqueness to it. As Mr. Merrill indicated, signage is a little different than some other areas because it's not as specific for compliance issues as some other issues. Decisions can be made. And Brian Walker went over basically what our comp plan says, and that's subject to interpretation. But the important thing is what is substantial competent evidence? And this is always something that's tough for the public, is that when you use it's a kind of a blunt word, competent, what that basically means are the people giving you opinions that they are basically legally recognized to give. For instance, some examples of it, which you may hear tonight, but we have obviously heard before, just a regular person coming up and saying, this is going to adversely impact my property value. Not particularly the sign, but an issue in a zoning case. If you allow this particular development next to me, that's going to adversely impact my property value. Courts have consistently said there are experts who value, appraisers, who need to come in and give valuation testimony. Similar to traffic issues, there are traffic engineers that give testimony that is, they are trained professionals to give those expert opinions. But you will hear that many times from just your citizens. Now, citizens can say, it's not sightly, it's ugly, it makes noise. Those are all things that a lay person can give an opinion on. But you got to be careful if people say, these signs adversely impact the value of my condo unit. Well, we need something, we need an appraiser to give that type of an opinion for you to consider. So that's the tough thing about, there's substantial and then there's competent. Substantial just means greater weight of the evidence. Competent is a little tougher because you can't always rely on what the citizens say when they give your opinion on something, because the law says that type of opinion needs to come from a qualified expert. Now, I don't know that we'll get into it in this particular issue, but I just wanted to qualify that. But basically, yes, you need substantial competent evidence to support the decision you make here tonight, whether it's in favor of or opposed to, and the initial burden's on the applicant to establish substantial competent evidence that they comply with our requirements.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I just wanted to get to the point that up here we have to base our decision and substantial competent evidence. So with that, we will open this up to public comment. As I said before, you have 5 minutes to speak to the commission, and only on this item. So is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the commission tonight on this item? Yes, sir. And state your name and address for the record.
Robert Van Winkle, 231 Riverside Drive, 1903. You have heard the opinion of 3 people that have a vested interest in selling, which is 20% of the building at this time. The attorney, who doesn't live there, Walter, who doesn't live there, Jonathan, who lives in New York. These guys came here, bought it, bulk, 100, 150 units, with the sole purpose to make money, to sell them, make profit, get out of town. They're being represented with the two people that were speaking tonight. There's 80% of people that live there, that have a vested interest in this community. I bought 12 years ago, pre-construction, used as a vacation home, and 5 years ago, liked the place, liked the community, the beautiful views, and moved here, and have been living there. Promptly, about a year and a half later, I got actually the recipient of the sign that sits directly in front of me. I'm right around the corner where that big sign is sitting. The city of Holly Hill has good laws on the books not to have huge banners. Many cities in this country are fighting against blight and big signs, and along the roads, the visual pollution of all the signs. You have those buildings sitting there that are speaking for themselves. They sit there. Anyone that comes across the bridge sees the building. No one goes out for a low ride and say, let's go and buy a condo this afternoon. When people buy a $300,000 or more condo, they do their research. These days, they don't do the research. They don't just go on a ride and look at buildings. By the way, all the way, one of the gentlemen here in the public has actually done the ride from Orland Beach to Ponce Inlet. There's tons of buildings, and they all have condos for sale. Each and every building has condos open that are not sold, or where owners want to sell it. Not a single one have a banner on it. People don't like banners. You have something at low level. When you drive in and you see a sign, a tasteful sign at low level, that's acceptable. That's business. Everyone has one. But to have this unsightly banner on the building, my own talks with a number of people. I know a lot of people in the building, and it's a tacky sign. It's cheesy. Why do you need it? Why do this guy? They come in here just to sell those units. Why do they sell more units now? Because they put an office. For a long time, there was no sales office. People were hesitant to drive into a gated community to find their way, and now they have an office there. They have an office at ground level with banners, with little flags hanging. Several signs are out there, and that's fine. That's normal business. I get that. But to have this big banner that I happen to be the recipient of having to look at it for the past 3-4 years, it's unsightly. I get visitors in, and the beautiful view, great, the ocean, the water, and they see the sign, and they say, nice. No one wants that. They don't live there. It's easy for them to say, oh, it's a nice sign, it's a big banner. Let's have that big banner on there. If they just have on the top, if you can maybe put that picture back on of the building. There's a panel on the top of the building.
Hey, Valerie, can you pull up the picture of the building?
Pull that back up?
Please.
Google Earth.
The Google Earth one, or the one that I got from Rob Merrill?
The PDF.
The Don Bell.
Anyway, there's one on the very top of the building. There's a panel. Can you give a shot from the bridge?
That's the Google.
Google Earth.
You can turn it a little. Yeah, you see it very, very clearly there. Especially there's a pole that sits in front of it, but the second building, you see that panel on the very top. On the very top.
Yeah.
And that's one nice big panel. If you want to draw attention to, we're selling. Everyone knows they're selling. There's a given. But if you have right there on the top saying a sign for sale or selling, it couldn't be better. Anyone can see that from across the bridge, from a mile away, so to speak, and see that they're selling. And that would be somewhat tasteful. It would not be in the way of any residents. In a way, I feel it's pretty unfair that about 15 people, that I'm one of them, have to look at, and there's a number of people that live in those condos that came tonight, and they're looking at that. So I'm not saying, that's right. I'm not saying that not to have a sign, but I'm asking for a modification to the. It's an exception to begin with. I ask for a modification to the exception.
All right, thank you, Mr. Van Winkle. Appreciate it. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address this to the commission tonight? In the back. Okay. Yes, you, sir. Just state your name for the record and your address.
Ron Willis, I'm at 241 Riverside, 607. The sign itself isn't that big an issue with me. I want to encourage, in the nature of the signage on this particular building, the council has already done a good job in addressing tacky advertising along Ridgewood in displays of mannequins, drawing people into their businesses, and it's this same kind of tacky advertising that I particularly object to. The banners in front of the sales office like a used car lot. You don't sell a Mercedes by tying a balloon on its antenna. To me, it degrades the property to put these big for sale signs on it. It goes against the aesthetics of the building the same way you're addressing the aesthetics along our major roadways. And giving an extra 3 years for a sign that, to me, denotes something new is almost like false advertising. That it looks like this is a brand new project, come and look at us. Well, it's not new anymore. This served its purpose in introducing the product. The product is now there and established as a quality product, and I think it can speak for itself without the shouting. That's all I've got.
Great. Thank you, Ron. Yes, sir.
Mike Morgenstern, 231 Riverside Drive. Valerie, online there was what this proposal was specifically for, and in there I read that there were in fact 6 signs, 5 additional signs. Could you bring that up, what the proposal is specifically?
Well, before we go there, we'll just ask Mr. Forte.
That's the amendment.
Brian, come up. The number of signs.
Are you talking about the amendments or number of signs?
Well, the number of signs are
on
in
your
the
web page. There was a PDF document, and that document described 6 signs in total. This sign, plus one at the north, south, and central location, and 3 flags out on the dock.
Mr. Walker, could you clarify what that is?
Did you find that in the?
Yes, the signage that the applicant requested back in 2016, part of the signage plan included, there was some permanent signage that you can see there, and then if you scroll down, Val?
Hold on. You gotta let the clerk do this.
He's talking to her.
Which one do you want, Brian?
Exhibit A. Okay, and then if you scroll down, this is what was presented back in 2016. If you continue. So that proposal had some permanent signage and it had temporary signage as well. If you keep scrolling down, this was part of the temporary, and then the banner further down was also part of the temporary, and then there was some temporary signage, some panels that were requested along Riverside Drive, 3 panels. What the applicant this time is asking for is basically a renewal of the sign package, Exhibit E. Obviously, the signage that is permanent signage is already there, so that's not part of the temporary aspect of this, but it would be everything that was requested in 2016, which in the Sixth Amendment was referred to as Exhibit E. In this particular presentation, it's Exhibit A, which is Exhibit E, which is this. So they're requesting everything that was in that package, which is the banner, the signs on the dock, as well as any temporary signage that was allowed along Riverside Drive.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Walker. If you'd like to continue, yes, Mr.
Could you
come to the microphone if you could.
I wanted to direct her. I think at the beginning of what you're scrolling through had a list of the signs. I will just tell you what they are while she looks for them. But it included 3 signs, 5 foot by 10 foot approximately, 5 foot high, 10 feet high, 5 feet wide, 2 panels each. That's being a total, in 3 locations, that being a total of 300 square feet of signage. It included 3 banners on the dock that were 3 feet by 12 feet high, flapping wind, and a banner on the dock, that right there, thank you, a banner on the dock that was 3 feet by 60 feet approximately. So I ask that this proposal that is before you includes many, many more signs than the one sign that we've talked about thus far. That's an awful lot of signs. Perhaps one sign is sufficient, but certainly not this number of signs should be considered. Second point I wanted to make was that with regards to the utility of the sign, the present sign, Mr. Merrill or the other gentleman testified that the number of units that were sold. I want to point out that they purchased 150 units. Prior to them purchasing those units, there were 350 units. That being a 3-unit per month rate of sale. Since they purchased, they've sold 50 units in 24 months, 2 units per month. So the rate of sale has not increased from the initial 10 years as it is today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask Scott's question?
Yeah, Vice Mayor.
Mr. Simpson, since Amendment 6 has already been approved, the signs the gentleman was talking about that were permanently proposed, there's no extension on those, is there? We're only addressing the sign on the building as the major amendment here because those signs were already approved in Amendment 6. Is that correct?
Not all of them were approved in Amendment 6. Some of them were not approved. There were signs that were on the bulkhead that were in that package that were not approved. And
right, but these signs up here.
The answer is there was this temporary package and there's a permanent package. Right. In the temporary package, most of those have been up. Nobody asked any questions about them. That's why I didn't get into it.
Right.
But they're the ones on Riverside that, I mean...
Right, but there's no change. There's no additional permanent signs.
There's nothing being added, no.
I didn't think so. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak? Yes, in the back. Yep.
Mayor, Commissioners, my name is Don Durham. I live at 241 Riverside Drive, 806 unit number. Since the board members' meetings for Marina Grande was submitted into record, I was actually one of the members of the board at Marina Grande and voted for that. I just wanted to clarify is that Daytona Grande LLC, John Maturian, is on our board. Good partner. I believe they were aggressively trying to sell units. The board voted to continue that signage. But I do want to give you some insight, at least from my personal perspective. I can't speak for other board members. One of the questions I do ask is that can anyone see that signage from their unit? And I got negative responses every time I asked that question. As you know, not everybody shows up at a board meeting. And so you make your decisions. I'm not saying that would have changed my decision at this point because I can't go back and reflect on that, and I don't want to tell you that. But I do want to say that, the signage, it wasn't until probably about a week or two ago that someone said, "Hey, I can see this signage from my room, and I would like to just snap me some pictures. Let me take a look. If it's okay, if I could submit these to the clerk so you can actually see the signage. I don't have ones for everybody, but if I can submit that,
we could pass them.
Thank you.
Yep.
So again, the Jonathan Maturian has been a good partner with us. I believe they're sincere. Property values, I believe, are only going to go up when all the units are gone. And so we have less to sell, and so inventory gets there, and then all of our property values will go up. And so if we do want to see that someday to sell or pass that on, we've got a much more valuable. So I'm not necessarily here to say change my opinion about the signage, but I would like some consideration. I did present this at the last, the property board meeting. I don't know what that was called, but I was here last week. That potentially and I did show you a picture of that. I think there's a great view of going over the bridge. I did communicate this with Jonathan and also his attorney, but I haven't really heard back from them on that. I do understand there's some cost in there, but I do represent all of the citizens there. I'm not saying they all agree, but I did want to communicate that since in the record is the board's decision. That does stand, and I'm not necessarily changing it. I can't change that. So thank you very much.
You're saying, wait, let me just clarify that one more time, that you wanted the now selling changed. Are these your photos?
Yeah, actually that was giving to me the one picture I pulled off of Google where I put now selling just right across the crest of the top. I believe that's a flat area, not above that. That's just a suggestion. I think it's more visibility when you come over the bridge. I think when you drive there, you actually have to be looking way to the left when you're actually looking at it to get that visibility. I'm not saying that doesn't draw people in. I'm just saying that if you've had something there on the side, which is a much shorter space, but in the front, and then plus all the traffic that you get on the river and things like that, you could potentially see a lot better on there. I don't know if that's the solution or not, but I put myself in a resident's place. I try to do that, and what I want to look at is signage for the next 3 years. Okay, I know that's not the intent. They want to be out. I want to help them sell their units when all possible. They've been a good partner. They moved the sales office to the front in the retail. I'd like to see that grow so the city could participate in that, and I know that they want to be aggressive in doing those things.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Mr. Groh.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to the commission on this item? Yes, ma'am, right here. Just name and address for the record.
Hi, Kimberly Clark, and I'm in 231 Riverside Drive, Unit 1509. Dawn's a hard act to follow, as is all of the speakers that are here tonight. And I know I'm really supposed to stick to this, but I am going to applaud and recognize the city. Thank you to our police department who has been really patrolling the park on the south side of our complex, because they have really done an amazing job, and there's a huge difference in what we see taking place down there. So I wanted to say that. And I also wanted to thank you guys for all of the improvements that you've done to make our city look like it is a part of our environment. We're a very small city, 3 miles, I think, between Daytona and Ormond, and those are worthy of environments that we really want Holly Hill to be part of. We want to have the same recognition in Holly Hill as they do in Daytona Beach Shores and their condo complexes, or in Ormond. And I recognize that as a city commission that we are working to bridge that gap, and so I want to thank you for that. As the largest tax base for Holly Hill, the residents of Marina Grande came here because of the great value of the amazing property that Marina Grande is, okay? When we bought because of the view. And, just like we have experienced in 3 minutes, I'm going to have to hurry. Just like we've experienced in our country, the division, right, in this last number of weeks, there's been divisiveness in Marina Grande between the developer and the owners, and what has taken place over the last 7 years that I don't have to tell you all about because you've been here to witness it. For us, that view is what we came to buy. That view is what drew us. It wasn't a banner. It wasn't, we moved from Orlando 7 years ago, and it was a realtor who showed us Marina Grand. Okay? It wasn't any signage. It wasn't anything like that. But I went to my neighbor, Robert's unit the other day, and just like we're not aware of what's going on in this country from somebody else's point of view, I also did not recognize what it was to sit on his balcony as opposed to mine and be witness to that banner and to the noise that it made, and to instead of enjoying the view, that you had something else that was taking your attention away from the view. That's it. It's an infringement upon the money that we have invested. And I can tell you that as a brand new, who bought pre-construction, I can tell you he bought more. I mean, they have invested more in their property than $200,000 to $250,000. Right? I mean, like 3 times or 4 times as much. So what I really want to encourage you all to consider is, somebody said it earlier, what is your vision of Holly Hill? Is it something in between our neighbors? Or do we want Holly Hill to be a continuum and go beyond Ormond Beach? And we can't do that when we have a banner on our building saying selling for $250,000. Because I can tell you most people in this room that are owners at Marina Grand paid way more than that. Right? So what is it? It's not the banner that sells the community. It is the community that sells the community, and it is us as owners that sell the community of Marina Grand, not a banner. The owners that bought from the bulk owner, they knew what they were buying into. And it was not the opportunity to add more signage or take Robert and Rita, who have held that banner for 5 years now, and extend that for 3 years more. And if somebody wants to come in and buy their unit, are they going to buy that unit when they know that sign is going to be there for the next 3 years? I say no. And I want to encourage you guys, we are your biggest supporters, your biggest fans. We bought here because we want this community to be everything that it can be. And as the attorney said, well, no, it's the promise of 2 more buildings. Well, I want to remind you to look at your records and see that the Blue Tide sold. There's no 2 more Marina Grand buildings in the works. This is not an opportunity for more, yeah, I appreciate it, for more revenue. We are your community, and we want to make this community better, and we hope that you all will join with us in doing that as we're joining with you. Thank
you, Mrs. Clark. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to the commission tonight? Yes, ma'am, in the white. Hello.
Hi, my name is Katrina Gaines. I'm not a resident at the Marina Grand, but I have spent just about the last 7 years working there. I'm currently on the RE/MAX sales team. Before that, I worked for the previous owner for almost 5 years, and I want you to know that for every week of those almost 5 years, I sat in my office, I looked at the registration forms of the customers coming into our sales office, and other than our local realtors bringing us buyers, that's the sign they came from. And I think it's important for the Marina Grand residents to understand and know that really it is in their best interest to get the rest of the units sold. It's going to take longer, and who knows really what could happen if we can't sell the units. Like I said, every week for 5 years, I sat and I counted these registration forms, and there is no doubt that that banner is helping sales.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Gaines. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to the commission? Mr. Legary.
Good evening. Jim Legary. Like Rob Merrill, I've been here since this started. I find it very interesting that we, as a commission, continue to vote for the success of the Marina Grande. I would like to follow up the gentleman's suggestion. Perhaps you could move that where the very fine residents don't have to put up with the flapping and the visual. And that's pretty well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Legary. Is there anyone else in the audience? Yes, in the back.
Thank you. My name's Wayne Olette, 231 Riverside.
What is that again? Wayne
Olette.
Olette. Thank you.
And I'm in 1703, so I do get to see the banner from my balcony. And just a couple of comments. I have recently moved there. My wife and I moved there in March, and the banner did affect how much we offered for our property. It was one of the things that we took into account when we were looking at the apartment. So it does have an effect on the real estate value, at least of some of the units. Certainly the 03 stack at the top, which is where we are. Also, as far as how effective the sign is, I don't know how effective it is, but I can tell you the process that my wife and I went through looking for a condo. We drove up and down the ocean, and we drove up and down the river. We found the condos that we were attracted to, and we called our agent, and he went out and looked for units that were available in those condos. So it wasn't the signs that attracted us to the condos, but the condos themselves. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Olette. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to the commission tonight? Yes, sir.
Terry Wood, 231 Riverside Drive, 1907. I'm the neighbor down the block from Robert, and I wanted to talk briefly about the signage, but I also wanted to compliment the chief, like she did earlier. Chief's done an excellent job, beyond excellent if there is such a thing, in Riverside Park. He's out there at 6:30 in the morning, patrolling that park, picking up trash with his grabber. I mean, the guy is incredible.
Yep. And if I could just steer it back, though, to only this issue, please.
Okay, back to the issue.
Thank you, Mr. Wood.
The sign is terrible. It is tacky. It does not bring anyone in to buy a condo. 4 years ago, we started looking at condos. We looked at over 75 condos between Ormond and Daytona Shores. Not once did a sign ever attract us. We looked through books. We spotted something. We called the realtor, just like he said. That's how we bought it. The sign just doesn't. If I lived in that stack of 03, and there's at least 10 units that have to hear that flapping and whacking and whatnot, I would be livid over that thing. I'd probably take a knife and try to cut it if I could. That's how bad that sign is, and I sure hope Holly Hill does not lend itself to that kind of signage within the city. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. I don't mean to cut you off on that. We all agree that Chief Aldridge is doing a great job, but we have to stay to this subject. Yes, sir, with the mask.
Half of them have masks on.
Yeah, true.
I'm Maurice Millard. I live in...
Say that one more time.
Maurice Millard.
Maurice Miller.
I live 906 on the North Tower at the MG. Now, I've listened to Robert, and I'm really impressed in what he said, and also Kimberly, who really did a good job. Now, I live on the north side, and I don't even see the tower, the banner. But I'm totally against it, because I think it cheapens the building. I bought my unit. I can tell you what I paid for it. I paid $250,000 6 years ago. I have since put in approximately $35,000 to $40,000. These gentlemen are talking about, the cost of a banner would cost $20,000. Now, nobody here tonight has talked about the blue lights. Do you know how many comments I have about the blue lights, which us owners paid for? I believe it was roughly $60,000. And they're worried about $20,000. That's bringing them in tens of thousands of dollars of profit for selling units at the MG. Now, they wouldn't have put an office in the front of the building, and they probably put quite a lot of money in renovating that without knowing that they're going to make a lot of money. Now, I'm with a lot of people at the MG that is totally against those banners. And I'm probably one. A lot of them won't come to these meetings. That, like Don said, they don't even come to the board meetings. But they certainly will talk about what they like and what they don't like. And what they don't like is that banner. And I think I represent a big percentage of people that would like you people to take that banner down. And these realtors are supposed to be the top people doing their work. They have other ways of selling these units at the MG. I didn't buy my unit because I saw the banner on the building. But I've been in restaurants and got into conversations with complete strangers. And they said to me, where do you live? Oh, I live at the MG on the Halifax in Holly Hill. Oh, you live right by those signs, those big blue signs. Those are magnificent. Gentlemen, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address the commission tonight? Yes.
Hey, hi everybody.
How you doing?
Yeah, I live at the Maria Grand.
Just before you start,
Sam Dijan.
Thank you.
D-I-J-A-N. I live in the 2403. So I know about the 03s like Robert and other people are talking about. But a lot of what they're missing here is this place that is supposed to be luxury. They're selling this a luxury place. But I call it, it's a desperation when you see a sign starting with that banner starting at $250,000. Are you kidding me? And then Peter will scratch your head. Why is it $250,000? And you see you have a water view and all, a beautiful view of the Atlantic Ocean and everything. So then it's like a fraud kind of feeling I get. Just like the stores in the front. If you look at Riverside Drive, we were told there were going to be stores in there. That's a fraud. There's this posters on the window. It's all empty. There's supposed to be a whole row of stores in front of this building. And I'm there 5 years already, and nothing has changed. So the word fraud kind of goes in my brain if you're not an idiot to think something differently. But again, the price was starting at $250,000. And I have friends of mine, they look at my balcony and they go, wow, this is like $1 million view. So they're saying $1 million view, and then they see this silly $250,000 starting at that. Any normal people will get suspicious. I think that turns people off. Just seeing that price at that low, that's like a desperation, and that turns people off. If they're smart, they said, but there's something weird going on. You got $1 million view, and why are you starting at $250,000 and up? So I thought, and I see that sign too, because I'm 03 on the 24th floor, and I love the view, but, get the desperation out of here. They're trying to sell luxury. You know what that word luxury has turned into? This place has the luxury to do anything they want in a negative way. That's the meaning of the word luxury. But I'm trying to be positive. I hope the sign comes off. And it's nice being here with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to the commission tonight? You can only speak once. I'm sorry, sir.
Can I?
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, sir. We have rules that
He rebutted me.
we don't do any rebuttals. I'm sorry. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to? Yes.
Good evening, Chris.
Good evening.
My name is Tarek Nemo. I was the previous representative for the bulk assignee, previous owner for all the units. I have done about 68 sales at the Marina Grand, and I know it very well. I do agree with all the residents, their frustration about the sign, but I think the challenge is having all these units not sold yet. I think this is the biggest challenge more than the sign itself. Since I came from real estate background, I know exactly that the sign, even if you generate one sales, is good for everybody. As an owner, I'm just concerned that if Daytona Grande struggle to sell, they're going to have all the rentals driving in, and that will drop the value down immediately. So that's the concern that I would like to share. Having the sign will drive some traffic. Maybe they can work it out with the rest of the resident, because I understand their concern about having it in front of their bedrooms. So this is all I want to say.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Nemo.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to the commission tonight? Seeing none, we will close public comments. Yep, you can come back up, and I know there's a lot that you will want to respond to.
I'll really be brief, and I'll probably have Walter weigh in on to the extent he can be helpful in some of the things that I don't know about. I want to say, first of all, thanks for the folks that came out. I hope that you guys who were in this process when we got the project approved 15 years ago can appreciate that there was a parade of people, kind of like the 11 or 12 that came tonight to voice their opinion. Many of whom were very passionate. Kimberly, you're passionate. There's no way I can equal that, but I will tell you that just for the record, the sale of the Blue Tie property has no relevance to the ability for the developer to build the other two buildings. I'm hopeful. As a third generation resident of Volusia County, I applaud what happened here, and I'm someone who has some pride in the ownership here, even though I don't own it. I was as part of this process. I think something happened that was great for Holly Hill, and hopefully it's going to happen twofold, I hope. And so the ability for these additional 95 units to be sold certainly has some bearing on the possibility of that. I would tell you that the comments that you heard about rentals tonight, I'm not here to tell you to threaten you about that. It's the reality of the economic reality. I mean, the folks that came here 3 years ago when I asked you guys to allow the signage package, I think 90-something% of them were here to talk about the rentals and the idea they didn't want rentals in this project. The economics, the facts of it speak to the way this will swing towards rentals if they have fewer sales. And Walter can tell you as an expert, as Scott says, some people that are talking about these things are experts. I'm not the expert. I'm an advocate, so I have my opportunity to do that as the representative of the owner. But Walter's an expert, and he can tell you what's happening. And the other real estate experts that have spoken, when there have been questions raised by folks that have stood up about value and relative values, there's your experts right there. I think Robert and the folks that live in that column that actually can see the sign, I think he's an expert on what he sees from his balcony. And you guys can take that as his testimony. And so I think that the pictures that were shown were of what he's objecting to. And I saw them. You can use your judgment. That's why you're the decision makers here. Look at those pictures and tell me whether they're offensive. And you get to decide. Now, the decision makers at the time 15 years ago about this project, who had an overwhelming outcry of please don't do it, please, it'll ruin Holly Hill, they stood up and said, you know what, we heard what you said, all of you, most of you. There's a few folks here that are business people that are going to gamble on this piece of property. And you guys said yes. And that's what you got, the result here. Does it have complications and some things that people aren't completely pleased with? Yeah, you heard it tonight, some of it. But compared to the outcry of objections 15 years ago, and even the outcry about the rentals 3 years ago, it's not a lot. So you get to balance. I couldn't judge. And again, like he said, I don't live there. But I've lived here for 3 generations in my family, and we got the 4th, thankfully, back here. So I have a lot of pride in the area. So I'm not here as some guy who's a hired gun coming from Orlando. It's not the case. You guys know me. But it's not about me. What I'm telling you is you have a decision to make, and you've seen the facts. You've seen the pictures. Maybe there's a place where we can compromise. That's usually where we end up with these things, right? We haven't fully explored beyond so we did try to explore. I got the information from Joe that there was, a possibility of putting it somewhere else. So we hired the sign company to come and mock it up. The one up there on the south side obviously doesn't work because it's blocked by the building. Whether the east side can work, we don't know. But maybe since there's 2 readings to this, maybe you guys decide, okay, you guys go take your best shot. So as a fallback, certainly that's an option. I think you guys saying no with an absolute on this one is something that ultimately, the city of Holly Hill lives with. If the sales go down and it doesn't have the success that we want, definitely doesn't help with the other 2 buildings. Definitely leans more towards rental than sale, obviously. So that's your choice. You guys get to decide. I took too long, so I'll stop. Walter, I think, is probably got a few things to say from the ground level, so I'll let him do that.
All right, thank you, Rob, and thank you again, Walter Borgen with Remax Signature. So I appreciate everybody that came up here. Like I said, we certainly take their insights and so forth. There's a lot of very intelligent people, put a lot of great thought into what their feelings and their emotions. But I do want to point out, a couple things about the sales or about the effectiveness of the banners. We're not making those numbers up, as Katrina said. She's been there for a while, as well as myself. Those are actual numbers that we check on the registration form. And I'll tell you, our 2 biggest lead sources are signs and realtors. Okay? Now, why are the signs so big, or why isn't internet bigger? If everybody starts their search on internet, in fact, if you Google that, 89% of people start their search on internet. Okay, why don't we get so many condo sales from the internet? Well, it's kind of simple, because if you go to start Googling things on the internet, or if you go to Zillow, or if you go to Realtor.com or any of those sites, what you're going to find out is you have to pick a city. And since Holly Hill doesn't have any other waterfront condominiums, nobody picks Holly Hill to look in. They look in Daytona Beach, they look in Daytona Beach Shores, they look in Ormond. They don't look online for Holly Hill to find condos. So it leaves us 2 sources. It leaves us realtors, which we're paying realtors 7% commissions right now on the outside brokers for them to bring people in to get their attention for them to come in, because we can't do it with a regular 3% commission. Okay? So, because they don't even remember it's there all of the time. And another comment was made about driving up and down the street and there's no other signs. You're exactly right. There are no other signs on any of the other buildings that are up there, or banners on the side of it. And that's because none of them have unlived-in units for sale. They're only resale units. None of them have a sales center that was invested and put on the front with people sitting there every day to try and sell these. So that's the reason you're not seeing those on there. If there were other buildings that had resale stuff, you're going to see signs. Also, with the signage on there, we aren't using 4 of the signs that are in that permit right now. So we're not even using all of the signs that we could be using on there, because we don't want it to look tacky. And I know some people don't like the look of the banner, but from a building banner signage, I think it looks pretty good. I don't think it takes away too much from the building. But we have to have something there to bring that traffic in. I was the person that pushed both the original developer and then now this one to get us a sales office outside, because I thought it would help, and they did work to get us a sales office outside. From that, we have 2 applicants right now that are looking to put businesses in there that will hopefully be moving forward with it. So it all takes a little bit of time. The building has been a huge challenge because of them building both of them at the same time. So like I said, it will affect our sales. Right now, there's 486 total units. The current owner that we work for owns about 90-some left. Of those, we have about 60 of them for sale, and we have about 40 of them rented. We keep taking from the rentals as those leases expire, so that way we have more inventory to sell. Because although it may seem like 60 is a lot, when you put ones on this side of the building, ones on this floor, ones this, and it's not as many as you think from a variety standpoint. So we're taking from that rental inventory constantly. We may have to slow that down. Like I said, instead of it taking us 2 or 3 years to get out of there, it might be 6 or 7 years to get out of there. Who knows? We might have to start offering 10% commissions to realtors out there. We might, it does have a huge impact. I know they say that it brings it down or it doesn't work, but that's the price of the building. We still have multiple units under $250,000 that are available. Most of those are rented right now, so they're not advertised in the current inventory. But we have over 10 units that we could sell for under $250,000. So to say that's fraudulent or to say that we're misleading the public is completely untrue. And the last thing I'd say is someone else said that we didn't increase the number of sales that came in there because we've been there for 2 years, divided this number of sales. We haven't been there for 2 years. We came in December of 2018. So we haven't hit that 2-year mark. And we also have, I think it's 7 or 8 pending sales that are right now that are where to go, plus all of the ones that have sold. So we're way ahead of the curve. We'd like to stay ahead of the curve. We do want the building to look great. It's obviously if it looked tacky or if it looked whatever, that would make it harder for us to sell. The last thing we want to do is make this building harder to sell, because I've sold, in fact, my company, just to give you an idea, in the Daytona area, there's nobody that sells more condos than us. Okay? My office is right in Daytona Beach Shores. We've done 4 new development condos there, as well as we sell more condominiums from Ormond by the Sea to Ponce Inlet than any other company. So I can tell you that it does make a big impact on the signs, and I guess that'll be it now.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
Thank you.
All right, so at this time, Vice Mayor, I know you've been waiting patiently. I know you had some suggestions. So let's jump into commission comment here, and if you do have some suggestions that you want to throw out.
Okay, hope I can remember them all. Marina Grand is an incredible project. It's changed the image and perception of our city as soon as construction began. I don't think anyone would imagine condominiums in the city of Holly Hill selling for almost $1 million 20 years ago. Just wasn't a possibility. So I believe it's an amazing project. But I'm a math guy. The sign must be effective or the applicant wouldn't be here. The real estate agent wouldn't be here if the sign wasn't effective. However, I really have to consider the 12 people that are affected by this. The 95 people the units that are for sale, maybe one of those by the new owner will be affected by this. So the new owner, it's all about money. We're paying 7%, possibly 10% for condos. There's a lot of money on the table here, guys. A lot of money to be made. And I think we would all agree, everyone in this room would agree, I believe, the best outcome for Marina Grand is to be 100% sold out, fully owner occupied. Everyone wants that. How do we get there? So we have a delicate balancing act. We have to encourage the sales of the units with respecting the owners that are there, the owners that have been there for so long, the owners that have put up with the sign for 2 years, and this commission gave a 3-year extension. So Mr. Van Winkle has been looking at that thing for 5 years. Whether it flaps or not, I don't know. But is the sign offensive? It's a blue sign on a white thing. Not offensive to me, but I don't live there. It's offensive to him. This commission did give a hard line in the sand 3-year deadline 3 years ago. And I would be more forceful for that deadline if it was the same original applicant. But then I have to weigh the fact that the applicant bought the 150 units knowing there was a deadline. If he didn't know there was a deadline, he didn't do his due diligence. So we're kind of like baby in the bathwater? How do you split it? How do you come up with a compromise that everyone can agree with? And I think the best compromise are when people go away a little bit angry. Everyone gives up a little bit. What can we live with? What's the most offensive thing that I've heard tonight is looking at the sign. That's the thing that I've heard is the most offensive. So I did some math. There's 95 units for sale. The average cost is $325,000 per unit. I have a letter here that says it costs about $35,000 to relocate the sign. Let's just say it's $50,000 to relocate the sign. There's a lot of money here to be made. If you take $50,000 and divide it by 29 units, because we're expecting 30% of these 95 units to be sold by this sign. It's the math I was given. If you take that number, it's $1,724 more per unit of those 29 units the developer would have to sell his units for. Well, is that fair? No, you should probably take that $50,000 and divide it by the 95 units that are for sale. That's an increase of $525 per unit, guys. And we're giving away 7% commission. The only way that I would support extending this would be that the sign would have to be placed on the top of the building where no resident can see it, and it would be painted on the building so there's no sound whatsoever.
Please, no clapping, please.
If you can, in my mind, I'm looking at the two towers, and where Don Bell proposed it is way back, and you can't see it. And that's a terrible picture. But we all know the sign is right where that pole is, everybody. If you push the sign more to the east, there's a huge flat area right above where the sign is. Right there. See that white space where the G on the top that you can't see? That white space goes, that's a pretty big chunk of real estate. And then Mr. Van Winkle pointed out, there's even a flat spot on top of that. Now, not from this perspective, because you never look at the building from that perspective. You're halfway up the bridge when you look at it, just like that. If someone put now on one building and selling on the other building, you're going to look at it. That's the only way I would support it, is that it's out of everybody's view, and it's not that expensive, whether it's $35,000 or $50,000. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars and tens of millions of dollars here. $50,000 is a drop in the bucket. That's the only way I would support it, because I've heard many residents that are affected by it. I think the lesson here, residents, is go to your homeowners association meetings. Let your voice be heard at that meeting so that I can have the homeowners association president come and say, we're against it. It makes the decision a lot easier. But that's how I feel. I think that's, and I don't know how it works out. I don't know if the residents will hate us for even having the sign, because some people say it's tacky. But maybe you can put up a little tacky if you sell a few more units. So that's how I look at this whole thing.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Members of the Commission?
Well, I just got a couple things.
Oh, go ahead.
Commissioner Johnson, things to say about it. I kind of lean more towards the business side of everything, seems like, but I listen to what everybody has to say, and I don't live there either. In fact, I live quite a ways from it, and he lives close to it, so I wouldn't hear the noise anyhow. But the way I look at it, in any real estate or any product, the hardest part of having a resale value is having too many things to sell of the same product. You know what I mean? Like if you can't sell the units and you got a lot of surplus units, you're just going to make your property value lower because they can go buy those before they would buy yours. You know what I mean? That's kind of the way I look at it. But I feel a lot towards what the residents have to say about it, because they've been there quite a while. They live there, they see it all the time, and it's a hard thing to say, because both sides are totally right in what they're trying to do. They're trying to sell the condos to make the condos more valuable, because more people will want them, because there won't be any availability anymore. And the thing about the banner is, I drove by and looked at it, and I even took my little grandson by and looked at it, and we decided it didn't look that bad from the road, but we're not looking at it from the condos. But I think what the vice mayor said over here about the putting that sign up on that spot, that blank spot up there where you can actually see, I don't see where that's a problem. I mean, I can understand. I do a lot of investing. I think if you invest some money and can make some out of it and make everybody happy in the same process, that's what I would go for more than anything. I would hate to be a judge all day, because I don't like to have to judge things and make the decisions on things. But I have to look at things from the business point of view or the citizens' point of view. And I can't just look at it from what's best for the city. I have to look at it from what's the best for the people that's dealing with the city as well as the people that's in the city. So I would have to say I'd support it the same, just about exactly the way that he put it over. And unless you wanted to put a balloon up, tie it to the building and have it on the balloon, you could see it real clear.
We have the blimp.
The blimp. I mean, just let it tie it to the building so it can't float away. That's my only thing I have to say about it. That's the way that I look at it. But I always look at things like the value is there only if there's not a lot of others available around it. You know what I mean? But if you can sell all those units, it's going to make your property value a lot more valuable, I think.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Daniel?
Okay. Pros and cons. Obviously, if the sign stays, residents are unhappy. If the sign goes, the units don't sell as much. Probably, I'm not an expert in that, but we knew when we got here, when we saw an audience this size, we were going to have happy and unhappy people at the end of the day. That just goes. But I also knew when I came to this meeting that there was a 3-year deadline, and that was supposed to be pretty firm. So I kind of knew that in my heart of hearts that it was going to take a lot to change me to anything but a compromise at best, because there was a 3-year deadline. So as we spoke and we threw out some ideas, it looks like, this would be the only thing that would be a possibility, and I would be in support of something like that. I'm not sure if I would look for something painted, because I'm not sure how much work is painted and unpainted and everything else, because I don't think anything that's permanently strapped to something above the units is going to be a noise factor. Commissioner Johnson's not going to hear it because he's deaf in one ear, can't hear out the other anyway. It really doesn't matter. But I would be in support for something like that, because, that's where I stand.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Daniel. Well, tonight we've heard a lot of very passionate people from both sides. I'm not going to repeat a lot of what Vice Mayor Penny said. He stole a lot of what I had prepared, but
you always let him go first.
Always. But we heard a lot from a lot of passionate people. A lot of people are affected by this. In the end, a lot of people are going to be affected by this no matter what, because of sales, right? So hearing all of the concerns and hearing Vice Mayor's Penny's compromise, I believe it's a good compromise. And it may not be a compromise that your client would be willing to do, but at this point, it looks like that's the consensus here on the commission. What my suggestion is at this point, because we are missing a commission member, instead of trying to tailor-make this from the dais, is to actually table this motion to come back in case there is going to be a change from where the sign location would be.
I was just going to remind everyone, this is first reading. So if we approve it now, the process continues, and we have, even if the applicant comes back, we can compromise even more at the second reading. So I just don't know, because it's
right. But I want to
pass the deadline. But I don't know how it does for code enforcement and all that kind of stuff.
And that was where my question was going. If we tabled it with the amount of deadline that we have, and I know that we've cited them. I don't know if that continues to pause since we're in the middle of this process. But my concern is we all vote yes. We don't know how Commissioner Curry feels. It comes back to us, and it's not where it needs to be. Then we'd have to tweak it from the dais, as opposed to being able to go through that process twice and allowing those people to speak.
Can I speak?
Yep.
My only concern is that It's pretty clear to me that there's consensus from the four of us to come back with some type of compromise. And that may be at the staff level for the applicant and Brian and Mr. Forte. Staff hears where we're coming from. The applicant hears where we're coming from. I know Commissioner Curry is very passionate about issues, but I don't see her changing the mind of the majority of this commission. With all due respect, I don't think the outcome would be any different if she was here. And if she was completely against it, I think it would be a 4-1 vote based on what I'm hearing. So I will do whatever your pleasure, but I don't think.
Well, as you know, I can't make a motion. So if you would like,
if you would accept my motion,
I am going to entertain a motion either to table or to make a motion to approve, but with the changes that you'd have to lay out.
Yeah,
if you want to.
Well, I would like to make a motion to approve this amendment based on compromises being made back to staff, between staff and applicant. How can I phrase this, Scott? Because I don't want to say painted on this particular area. I want to give them some wiggle room to work it out and then bring it back to us for approval.
Accepted compromises?
What you're basically saying is you want to make a motion to approve so the applicant and staff can work on a compromise to be acceptable at the second reading, along the terms of what you've outlined, which would be utilizing the very top flat panel of the two buildings for the signage.
That's what I want to say. I'll make that motion.
All right. No, we have a motion. Hold on. We have a motion on the floor. We have a second on the floor. Now for discussion. Commissioner Danny, you had a question.
No, go ahead, John.
No, I was going to say, unless there's a better compromise for the applicant. I mean, we don't want to stranglehold into just that area. I mean,
but that was the discussion, and I think
that seems to be the best area. But what if they come with a better idea?
The better one. But I think the goal is something that is not visible by the residents.
Right, not obtrusive or whatever.
And I assume this motion would also approve all the other application sign requests, because there are other ones that have been pointed out. The only one we really focus on is this particular sign.
That seems to be the only one that's concerned.
Right.
Okay.
So it would be approving all the other sign requests with. You want to go forward, but you don't want them to get.
I want to move forward, but I would not approve the application as submitted.
Right. Okay. You want to move forward so they have an opportunity to
address the concerns. Okay.
And so, and presumably, if they don't want to resubmit, then it can come forward, and this body could approve 5 of the 6 sign requests, and just not the 6th one. On second reading.
Right. So that's how I see it.
Okay. We'll work on it between now and second reading.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor. Vice Mayor, you made the motion, so
I've said enough.
Okay. Any discussion needed?
I thought he seconded.
He seconded.
Brian's already got it all written down.
All right. Any other further discussion? No. All right. At this time, we'll take a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. All right. Moving down to communications. Mr. Forte.
We got something else on the agenda.
No.
Oh, it is. It's under my communications. Hold up the meeting.
Where at? Yeah, communications.
Let me just wait.
Yeah.
Hold up the meeting for a moment.
Yeah, that's what.
If we could move the conversations outside so we could finish our meeting, we'd be grateful. Thank you.
But the documents are prepared by But I think you're right. It's an FPL form.
All right, Joe.
Okay, so there are 2 easement agreements in the agenda packet that I need your consensus on, a motion to approve. And these are with regard to the overhead underground project that we spoke about earlier at the workshop. One of them is located at the corner of LPGA and Ridgewood on the southeast corner, where a structure, part of the utility, the FPL equipment will be above ground at that location. And the other is on 10th Street toward the park, close to Field 4, but on 10th Street. And those two easements are needed as part of the overhead underground project.
Thank you.
Joe, in the presentation it said there's 4 city easements. Are the 2 others that need to be accomplished at a later date, or?
In the
presentation that we had during the workshop, it said there's 4 easements, 4 city easements.
Yeah, one was Chris's, one was 8th Street.
No, it said city properties, 4 in process.
Yeah, it did say 4 in process.
I should have said 2, huh?
Are we missing a couple?
I'm not sure if there are 4 in process. That's the only 2 that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Might have been a typo.
Could be, but I'll find out for sure.
Okay, thanks. So you need a motion to approve the 2 easements, Mr. Mayor?
Yep, please.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. At this time, we'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this item? Seeing none, we'll close public participation. Any discussion needed? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Forte.
Okay, a couple of items just to discuss. We identified a grant that we can apply for that will help us to reskin the siding on the fire department. We went out and got an estimate, and that estimate came back at about $600,000 that the grant would cover. But part of the grant application, I think it only cost us $120 to build it. But that grant application requires a local match, and you get 10 points for your match, but it doesn't say how much of a match. So I want to run this past the commission that we go ahead and apply for that grant and propose a 10% match of $60,000 that we would put in the budget next year, and hope that we would score high enough to get that grant back. But that's to reskin the entire building, top to bottom, all 4 sides. And it may or may not come in at that number. That's just a very, very high ballpark estimate.
Is it the roof too, Joe, or just the sides?
Sides.
It's in bad shape.
Commissioner? Is that typical match from your experience, 10%?
Different grants have different match requirements, but I figure 10% would be fair. Certainly, it's not going to be a 50-50 match, I can tell you that.
Yeah. All right.
So I need your
for that too?
I need your okay to go ahead and do that one. Yes.
Consensus or a motion?
A motion would be good.
Is there a motion on the table?
No. You make it?
I'll make the motion, yeah.
Motion to approve?
To approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the grant as stated by Mr. Forte.
Match.
Yes, the match.
Right, okay.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the commission on this item tonight? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. Any discussion needed? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Forte.
The other is the Department of Economic Opportunity grant for technical assistance to rewrite and update the city's comprehensive plan. This grant we already submitted for because it was time sensitive but doesn't require a match, and it's approximately in the, where'd Brian go? There you go. In the $40,000 range. So we've already submitted that, so I just wanted to make you aware that, the comp plan is out of date. It certainly needs some updating. I'd love to get somebody to help foster the rewrite of that. One person in the planning department is not going to have time to do it, so Brian wrote it himself, so he put the time in after hours and at home to get that grant submitted by its deadline. So we did submit that. I really don't need any action on that unless somebody opposes what we're doing.
Thank you.
I provided to you a couple of personnel changes that I sent to you in an email, and just checking with you to see if anybody had any objection. One dealt with a full-time employee going to part-time and maintaining the other part-time employee on staff so that the FTE count remains the same. And the other was a modification to how we are operating code enforcement. So did anybody have any questions or concerns about that? And then lastly, it's time for us to go out and solicit an RFP for an audit company, an audit firm. So the law has changed on how the proposals are reviewed. In the past, the staff reviewed the proposals and made a recommendation to the commission, and the commission got presentations and made the final decision. The law has changed now to say that the staff can't be the review committee, and we have to have a committee other than a staff made-up committee, which has to consist of at least one member of the city commission. So I already spoke with 2 members of the business community that have somewhat of a financial background, although it's not required to review an RFP, and 1 finance director from another city that would be willing to serve on the audit committee, and I just need 1 commissioner to serve. Now, the staff will be part of the committee, non-voting member of technical assistance and advisory, but not a voting member, and we're looking for someone on the commission to serve. I anticipate we'd probably get maybe 3 or 4 proposals that would need to be reviewed and ranked, and then brought back to this commission for final decision, and that will be probably around mid to late July.
Okay. Vice Mayor Penny, being that you've been the longest serving commissioner here through the most amount of audits, is it something you're interested in doing?
And he said he's a numbers guy.
Yeah, and he's a math guy. You sealed your fate there.
Yeah, you blew it. I think I just signed myself up for it. Yeah, I could do it.
Thank you. Do we need a motion to nominate him, or just?
I would do it as a form of
motion nomination.
Okay. We want to make the motion to nominate Vice Mayor?
Absolutely.
All right. Mr. Danio makes a motion to nominate Vice Mayor Penny to the audit board to choose the auditor. Can I have a second? Commissioner Johnson seconds.
He can't second it.
I could if I wanted.
He could, but it's in bad taste.
You can't second it.
I can't second it unless I move the gavel to him. So I could do it in this case.
Process of elimination, I second.
There we go. All right, we have a motion and a second. We'll open this up to the public. Anyone in the audience like to talk to Vice Mayor's appointment to the audit board? Seeing none, we'll close public participation. And any discussion needed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Mr. Forte.
That's all I have. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. All right. I wanted to update you all on the governor's letter.
No comments, just in case you care.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's always no comments from you. This was the one night that you could have, though. Sorry, Mr. Simpson.
What about the city clerk? Does she have?
Mrs. Manning, do you have anything? Mr. Gutakis? All right. So I wanted to update you all on the governor's letter that you all helped me pen last meeting about the reopening and the fairness of all businesses across the board, in particular when it comes to the shutdown of our bars. Happy to report that I have talked to 2 people in the governor's office, and that it was given to him. I didn't hear from him himself, but other mayors followed suit soon after the letter was sent, and from what I hear, created a little bit more pressure from outside of just the state legislator by sending it. So I appreciate and applaud this commission for taking that action and being bold and being the first to be out there, and so I appreciate that. And so as you all know, the bars are back open, and with limitations, of course, and so I appreciate that. Also, to do COVID-19 testing, we're doing testing right now this week at Holly Hill Elementary and Middle, Holly Hill School right now, so they're doing COVID-19 tested, so if you know anyone that has any symptoms, you can send them that way. The other thing I wanted to bring up was we had a lot of positivity, momentum moving, and then we fell into this pandemic. And I wanted to say we have a lot of things about to really start opening up again. All of our businesses are reopening, but it looks like. But their gymnastics center, I drove by that today, and man, it's looking good. It's paved and ready to go, and they're just about ready to move in. We, of course, have the pickleball, which is almost about to be finished, that whole entire complex. So a lot to look forward to as we come out of these dark times in this pandemic. So that's a positive note. And I made a note, too, to thank you, Chief. I receive emails a lot throughout this job, and received quite a few about you, specifically from someone that was here tonight, in regards to you visiting Riverside Park and picking up trash yourself, and so obviously some of the members there at the Marina Grand appreciate that. So I wanted to thank you publicly for that. I also wanted to say that my thoughts and prayers are with you and all of our officers, and I hope to goodness that we can all get through this. We can all come together and move forward from there. I can't understand the thought process that we wouldn't need police officers in any capacity, and to me it's an absurd idea. So just wanted to state that, and with that we're going to move on to Commissioner Danio.
Oh, Commissioner Danio's tired. I don't have a lot to say. I'm happy that I serve on a commission that's got open ears and, is receptive to the ins and outs of the people, the community, citizens, etc., and that we don't jump to conclusions, and that we kind of process things accordingly, and we're prudent about our decision making. And I think we did a good job tonight listening and the course of action that we took. So I just wanted to say that, and other than that, that's about all I'd say.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Johnson.
I just got a couple of little things. I was kind of hoping that we could get through the first phase of the pandemic without having our two major retirement centers, or whatever you would actually use them as a terminology. But we have Bishop Glenn, and also we have the Riviera. And now the first I heard the Bishop Glenn, I got hit with like 12 cases. So that's not a good thing. So we're not out of the woods yet. I mean, a lot of things open, a lot of things getting back to normal, but we still have to be careful. And I like the way things are moving ahead, especially with the gymnastic place on Nova Road. That looks good up there. And need to caution the chief here, though, that about him picking up trash, it could be a union job and somebody could file a grievance on you. Mm-hmm. So you got to be careful about that. I've been down that road before. And the only other thing I got is I was looking at this fiscal year little pie chart we have here that I think Stella put on the thing. Is there any way that out of all the things that we do, out of all the money that we collect and save and have, we can only collect 1% interest no matter what we do safely?
1% interest on our monies in the bank?
Yeah.
If you recall, 2 years ago we invested some monies. The market took a dip. We pulled it out. We put it in some short-term CDs and money markets. Are we still invested in the money markets and the CDs? Yeah, so we have them on staggered CD terms. So we're getting better than bank savings rates. I don't know what the rate is right now, but the money's...
Pie chart here, it says we collect 1% interest.
Yeah.
On all of our funds.
Well, I mean that's all we're getting out of the CD rates. That's probably an estimate, but not an exact. But there's nothing else that's safe and liquid.
Yes, Stella, you can come forward.
I've been doing a lot of study on that lately.
If you can find something that's going with 6%, let me know.
Guaranteed.
Guaranteed. Stella Grenay, Finance Director. That 1% just represents the amount of the general fund revenue that comes from interest. It's not the interest rate.
But the interest rate is probably not much more than the 1% that we're earning.
No,
say that one more time,
Stella. A little bit better, but I'll be glad to give you the current rates.
Of the whole fund.
We can invest in. Oh, yeah. I know the S&P is running 4.5% this year so far.
State law limits what we can invest in. Isn't that right?
I'm sorry?
State law limits what we can invest in, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, we put together an investment policy.
We have an investment policy, too, yes.
Because you can't take much of a chance with a lot of the citizens' money, right?
Right.
Well, none of it.
That's all I had about this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Mayor? Wait, Joe asked. Hold on, he had something.
Two things I wanted to mention because it was brought up here. One is you saw the email that I sent off to the county manager with regard to the notification of how we were informed about the Bishop's Glen COVID cases that have increased over there. And I believe I read the article to say that there were 18.
I thought it said 12.
It was 1 death, 11 residents, and 6 employees.
Right.
12.
Yeah.
I thought it was 12 residents.
deaths.
No, so that was the total.
18 was said.
So
That's worse yet.
I was made aware of it about a week ago, and the impression that I got was the health department was going to notify the first responders and then come back to me to let me know when I could notify all of my elected officials. But I was asked to keep it quiet. I did contact the mayor. I know I ran into John Penny and I ran into John Danio and mentioned
You didn't keep it very quiet because it got in the news journal.
I didn't put it in the news journal, which is part of my frustration. So if the manager is told to keep it quiet, but it gets printed in the news journal a week later, and my first responders aren't made aware of it, I'm pretty upset. I was pretty upset about it this morning when I spoke with the fire chief. You know, I've got a son who's a paramedic, I got a brother who's the fire chief, and I got a niece and nephew who are firefighters that deal in this. If a former fire chief that's a city manager can't look out for their best interest, I don't know who the hell is. So I'm not happy with the health department. I did speak to George Rechtenwald this afternoon, the county manager. He's just as frustrated. The health department does not report to him. So the public information officer that I spoke with, they report to the state. And they hide behind the shield of the state in getting this information out, and they use every excuse not to publish it.
So they are not under George Rechtenwald?
They're not under the George's control. They have the ability to put pressure on the governor to replace the representative that operates the health department, and she's been under the gun before because of this, and this is an ongoing problem with the disclosure of the information that's getting out. So I can tell you, the firefighters felt a sense of distrust when they had to read about it in the paper. And this is a group of men and women who have to go into that facility. They went to that facility almost 20 times over the last 2 weeks without knowing that it's a hotbed. They go in there protected. I'm not concerned about that. They wear their gear. They treat everybody as if they're COVID-19 positive, so they have their protection. It's the fact that we were told, and they were told, that they would be kept informed of hot spots as this thing was progressing, and they were not. And I felt that this was a enormous lack of confidence in the system. So, make that clear. The second thing is, I wish the folks we met with this morning would have been here this afternoon to hear the accolades for the chief, because we have a group that think just the opposite. And we've been struggling with some issues down at the 2nd Street Park, which has prompted the chief and others, myself included, to visit the park frequently. And we have a problem with some homeless people, some transients. They're using the restrooms. There are, periodic drug deals. There's a number of things that are going on down there that are difficult for us to catch. When they see a car come in, they disperse. They know what the police cars look like for the most part. My car is very similar to the chief's car, so I don't get in there very easily without people dispersing either. So I met with Ray, who's the property management manager, and with Don, who's the president of the HOA Association today, to talk about some ideas. One of the ideas that we floated was the possibility of sort of privatizing the park, but later this afternoon I learned that that's not even an option on the table, because the park is the land that the park sits on is state-owned, so it will always remain as a public park. Just so that I was open to any and all ideas, but that will come off the table. One of the problems that we have in there is the overgrowth of the brush. There's a lot of palmetto palms, or whatever they're called, in there. They're really a nuisance plant. There's a lot of Brazilian pepper plants, and they're places for transients to hide, to sleep, to create camps. So I've asked my public works team to go in there at their pace to try to eliminate all those palmetto bushes and drop it down to the ground, to surface material with pine bark, and keep the trees. So you'll have the tree growth and the canopy of the trees that are in there, but we'll eliminate all that vegetation where these people are hiding. We're struggling right now still, because from the start of this pandemic in March, the end of February, beginning of March, we lost the inmates. That's 48 man-hours a day that we lost. 6 to 8 inmates, 6 to 8 hours a day we lost. So our staff is trying to make up that time. So you're starting to think, especially with the rains, things are starting to grow quicker. So we just don't have the manpower to do some of this stuff. We're hoping that the inmates are going to be released back to us in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So I just want to give you an update on that.
Great.
That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Forte. Vice Mayor?
I just like to applaud the commission for listening and trying to solve the problems. And it was encouraging to have a citizen come with a problem with solutions, like you had said. One thing, Joe, that was mentioned was speeding. And I know this commission had talked about it in January, and we were going to transition from warnings to tickets, and then the pandemic hit. And I know we're trying to limit face-to-face contacts through the window and all that kind of stuff. So can we get back to that, or is it safe to get back to that? Or
we're going to get back to that. Like I said, the state program, that grant is going to kick up again, and the 2 state roads will be brought back up to full capacity that we're using with the overtime, and we'll get our motor officer back involved with doing the speed enforcement on Riverside Drive, Center Avenue, and we get a lot of complaints from the side streets, the 6th, 8th, Walker, Flomish, those streets we get complaints. A lot of people speed.
Right.
I don't think anybody in this room can raise their hand to say they don't speed. I can tell you right now, I do 78 miles an hour down the highway. I'm over the speed limit.
Passed up by old ladies in dump trucks. What are you talking about?
I also have an old car.
Yeah.
It doesn't go more than 25.
It is very difficult, and I do want to see the report that was handed out, because the engineering world will tell us that speed humps and speed bumps don't stop people from speeding.
Actually increase, don't they?
It actually makes them peel out more. It becomes traffic hazards. It's difficult for police and fire to go down those roads if they have to go in an emergency. Sometimes it redirects stormwater. So there's a lot of problems with speed bumps and speed humps. But he's right about one thing. You hit somebody in the pocket with a ticket, they're going to stop speeding, and that word's going to get out.
You don't speed in the shores.
We get through.
What you call the ghost car?
We have 3 ghost cars out there now.
Do they get moved from time to time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we move them around. And we'll get back to, before the pandemic hit, the response the direction I had given the chief was, have your officer start issuing tickets until the commission tells me they're getting too many complaints about tickets. That's when I know we're done. So we'll get back to that, and we'll start issuing traffic. No more warnings. We'll get into issuing citations for speeding, and when you get enough complaints, we'll slow it down.
Thanks.
Because it's your residents who are going to get ticketed.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that are speeding.
Now it's people going to work that live in Ormond.
Yeah,
speeding down Riverside Drive.
Okay.
But most of the people that call me and complain about speeding, they know who it is. It's the guy down the street.
Yeah.
So,
and by the way, I never get complaints about speeding on US 1. I get complaints about, they came down my house, my kids can't play outside.
How many traffic lights on US 1 to speed?
Where? On US 1? Right. No. And I agree, we have to do that. What I'm saying is I think in order for the citizens to see any difference from what they're complaining about is they're complaining about speeding on their street.
Right.
I see it every day on my street as well. Mm-hmm. But it's one of those things. It actually says in this little summary this guy gave us that there's no magic bullet. Nope. There really is not. So there's no cure to someone deciding to try to get somewhere faster.
So I got, Mayor. Thank you. That's it.
All right. I want to applaud you again, Mr. Forte, for sending that email to the county manager. It took a lot of guts for you to stand up and say what you said, and we know you as a man to always do that, and I appreciate that. I'm pretty ticked off. I'm very ticked off.
That was my third reading of that email, by the way.
I am.
I was like, you must have sent your first one.
Look, I'm ticked off, and I was ticked at the county, and I'm glad I didn't contact them yet, because now I find out really it's with this person that answers to the state, and there has to
put some pressure on the health department.
We have to put pressure there because there was an extreme lapse, complete lapse, completely unfair, and
county doesn't need any help getting.
There's just no
trust.
There's no words for it, and so I'm going to continue to look further into this and see if there can be changes made. Is there any further business?
One other little thing. If you do have a birthday party, he's He does a good job of catering.
Oh, good catering. All right. Any other further business? With that, this meeting is adjourned.